Okay, good morning, everyone. I think we'll get going. Welcome to today's Business Support Series webinar from the Halifax Chamber of Commerce. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Kent Roberts. I'm the Vice President of Policy with the Halifax Chamber and your host for this morning. As you can probably imagine, the Chamber has been closely following the center plan development over the last few years and providing feedback and input where we could and where we've been asked to. No question the plan is important for Halifax's growth, and we're looking forward to hearing the update from our guests and learning more about the next steps with the center plan. So thank you to everyone who submitted questions for our presenters today. And when we get to the Q&A after the presentation, please feel free to type in any other questions into the chat box, and we'll make sure we get to as many as we can before the end of the webinar. Our presenter today is Ben Sivak, the Community Policy Program Manager with Halifax Regional Municipality. Through his work, Ben has led a wide variety of planning initiatives ranging from individual building sites to region-wide policies and regulations that shape the sustainable growth in our urban and rural communities. Joining Ben today for backup support is Kasia Tota, Principal Planning Center Plan Project. So Cassie will be here to help Ben if there's any questions that may need some further support. So welcome, Ben and Kasia, and thank you for joining us. And I'll turn it over to Ben.
Thank you, Kent, and good morning to everybody watching online. Very pleased to be here to provide an overview of Central Plan Package B. It's been a long process, and as Kent mentioned, an important one for the city and especially the urban core of the region. So thank you to everybody who's already contributed some great feedback, whether it's through the stakeholder or public feedback process. Really, that's been it's been a culmination of a lot of work, including the great input from this group. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and jump into a presentation. And I should explain to the people watching online that this presentation I'm about to give is based on a presentation I've been doing to various committees. So where we are in this process, we're kind of on the last phase we're in the council and committee review process for Package B. And so what you're seeing is the kind of the same types of information that the council committees are seeing right now and considering it and making recommendations about. So in this, over the next 30 to 40 minutes or so, probably more like 40 minutes, I'm going to go over the center plan context and planning process. It sounds like members are pretty aware of the center plan, but just to get people, catch people back up to speed, it has been a long process. Where we come from, and what are the steps been? I'll spend a bit of time on Package A, and for people might be aware of the phased approach to center plan. Package A was the first phase, so I won't spend too much time on it, but I will explain what was included in Package A, what's already in place, and what are some of the key proposed changes that we're proposing through Package B. I'll spend most of the presentation going over the Package B, which is the second phase of the center plan process, and what's the kind of new items and the new zones and policies proposed right now that council is considering. Touch on the remaining committee and council review process, and also touch on next steps. What happens after the center plan is always more work, and of course leave lots of time for questions. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what kind of questions that the chamber and also the members have for Kasia and I. Okay, so first, an important context. I'll just take a step back from the center plan for a minute. Is to explain how it fits into a broader secondary plan and bylaw simplification program. As a chamber might know, in Halifax Municipality, well, we have one regional plan, which is of course very helpful and important. Underneath that, we have 23 different secondary plans and 24 different land use bylaws. Various historical and reasons why that's happening, partly because of amalgamations or different planning approaches in the past. But what this means is that there's lots of duplication and inconsistency between the plans, and some of them are quite outdated. And in fact, the plans in the regional center are probably the most are some of the oldest plans. Not to say that they don't do good things, but over time, this doesn't meet today's challenges. So a larger program being led by planning and development is to consolidate the plans, and I think we're aiming for 3 plans: a regional center, suburban plan, and rural plan. Overall, to streamline the administration and user experience, one definition of height instead of various definitions, ultimately responding to current challenges. And the first phase of it is the center plan phase. So again, thinking about updating the plans for the center, regional center, and then moving to the other parts of the municipality. So just to put the center plan project in context. I know, and starting with the regional center for good reason. As I mentioned, it also has some of the more outdated plans, but it's also the area experienced a lot of significant growth, not just in past years, but seems to be a focus for major developments. It's a relatively small area of Atrium, but it's about a quarter of the population. And I think the chamber would know well that it's also a political, economic, and cultural center of the municipality. It's where we have our cultural facilities, our sports facilities, our museums, and so on, our major office developments. The regional plan targets at least 25% of the overall municipality growth, and the integrated mobility targets at least 40%. And this is because of the efficiencies that can be achieved by directing new growth to the regional center, where we already have transit, parks, and other services close to where people live. And just to put this and see how we're doing the last couple of years, between 2018 and 2020, that the regional center accommodated about 23% of net housing starts. So that's a little bit under that regional plan target. So that does vary from year to year. It has been higher in the 2 years prior to that. And just to put it in absolute value, we're talking about a little bit over $250 million in construction value. So a significant amount of investment in the regional center. Now, the center plan process itself dates further back than I probably have on the slide. I think the ideas or the overall framework for the center plan probably goes back over a decade. But the center plan, as we know it, really started in September of 2015 with a series of background studies and community engagements. This culminated in a guide and direction document known as the Purple document, which council provided direction on kind of the high level framework for the regional center, so the precursor for the official plans. And just to highlight kind of the important visioning working with various stakeholders and members of the public to really make decisions about the guide decisions about where growth should be allocated and what and just what the future of the regional center should look like in the decades ahead. From there, because the planning project was so big and covered so many different topics, it was split into 2 phases. Package A was completed in September 2019 and focused on high growth areas. So the areas where growth was targeted, was prioritized to be able to get that part of the project done sooner. Package B, which is the phase that we're looking to complete in the coming months, is updating the zones and the planning policies for all the other areas of the regional center, resulting in one comprehensive plan. I guess for clarity, because it's often misunderstood, it's sometimes not as though we're going to have a package A and a package B plan. At the end of the day, package B is really updating package A, but to include all areas of the regional center. And just the highlight, I mentioned all the great public feedback and visioning process happened in early phases of the project. Through package B, we're generally focusing on the recent engagements, but that's not to discount the feedback that received in earlier phases, which also is continuing the guide work for package B. So in package B, you can see on the slide there, we have a kind of pre-COVID state and a post-COVID state engagement process. I think like many other projects in the municipality, but really, across Nova Scotia or perhaps around the world, the central plan package B process are very much impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Just before the start of that pandemic, we were able to complete some engagements, some pop-up meetings, and stakeholder sessions that we received some really good feedback at. But the public meetings that we had planned had to be canceled, along with all sorts of other in-person meetings that were planned at the time. From there, myself and the team, and under the guidance of the Community Design Advisory Committee, had to pivot to more of an online format for engagement. So it's similar to what we're doing with this webinar now, and I'm sure that in years past I'd be talking to you in person, but here we are adapting and meeting virtually. And that was generally the approach with the package B engagement, is to kind of use the technology and all the tools available to try to get the feedback, that are so important to these types of planning projects. That's included social media and a lot of correspondence, surveys that were put out last summer. We received a reasonable amount of feedback, holding virtual stakeholder meetings wherever we could, and with last phases focused on the established residential, so low density areas, and also the St. Patrick Alexandra site. And for anyone who's interested, all the results of the package B engaged, including the process, the key feedback we received, some of the themes and detailed surveys, is all posted on our website in a What We Heard report. It also includes the detailed engagements on the St. Patrick Alexander site, all the correspondence, and also site-specific Crest. So a good resource for, it's been a great resource for staff and our council committees, but anyone who's interested, I'd encourage you to go take a look online and just see what the feedback has been through the package B process in this What We Heard report that was published in February 2021. Okay. That is the kind of a run through of the central planning process. Hopefully that catches everyone kind of up to speed in terms of where we've come from. And at this point, I'm going to switch gears to provide an overview of Package A. So what were the parts that were already in place and approved, and then what are some of the tweaks or refinements that are being proposed to Package B? I think firstly, probably the most important part of Package A that was approved, it's currently in place, is establishing what we call a core concept, so the main kind of pillars or goals of the regional center plan. So these include complete communities, so having access to shops, services, open spaces, ideally within walking distance where people live. A focus on human scale design, putting pedestrian first, especially with the transportation networks. And also strategic growth, so directing growth into thoughtful and strategic locations. The Package B covers a number of land use designations, or we call it urban structure. So these are the high growth areas I mentioned earlier. This included downtown Dartmouth, centers, which are together with downtowns, are intended to accommodate the highest mix of uses in some of the larger buildings, so they accommodate high-rise buildings. As some of the centers identified include Queenville Road, Wise Road area, also Yonge Street area. The corridors, which were kind of the pink shown on the map, which is applied to more transit routes, so kind of more of a linear mid-rise type of development. Again, mixed use for both commercial and residential, it would be permitted in those areas. The higher order residential, which is more of a multi-unit, more of a residential focus, and also future growth nodes, which are areas targeted for master neighborhood scale planning to make decisions around road and park layout and where significant redevelopment and growth could take. So places like Shannon Park and the existing shopping malls where potentially thousands of new residents could be accommodated in those lands. So because that was Package A, and I don't want to spend, I want to make sure we have time to talk with Package B. I'm not going to go in too much detail into those zones and designations that were approved, but we'll talk about some of the overarching policies that were approved in Package A that continue to be relevant to the Package B process. They continue to apply just as much to the Package B, the framework that I'll present next. And this includes a focus on urban design. I think a really important part of center plan is the focus on providing direction to the look and feel of buildings and how they relate to the street. Instead of kind of being one at a time decisions and review, a number of different frameworks is set up to guide that human scale and pedestrian first experience. And it's an overall approach is to be fairly flexible with with land uses. So what happens inside the buildings, while being careful with how the buildings look on the outside. So it was through package A and the focus on urban design that we've introduced the concept of floor area ratio. So this is a way of measuring density, which provides a lot of flexibility for how massing of a site, how the building on a site is developed, but as a way of controlling how much overall floor area is permitted on a site. And also a maximum building height framework for other areas where we are concerned about building heights, like the corridors, like the corridors where we really just want a mid-rise framework and are concerned about transition to low-rise neighborhoods. The urban design also establishes transitions to low-rise neighborhoods, so that larger buildings need to step down to low-density areas. Protecting views, view corridors, rules for protection from wind and shadow, so larger buildings can have impacts, kind of mitigate the impacts of larger buildings from impacts of wind and shadow. A focus on pedestrian-oriented commercial streets. So these are streets where commercial uses are not just allowed, but actually required on the ground floor to maintain that active streetscape, and also focus on site and landscape design. Another important part of Package A is introducing policies and a framework for protecting cultural and heritage resources in the regional center. And this includes identifying a number of landscapes of cultural significance. So landscapes that have some sort of cultural meaning that are not necessarily defined with zoning, but guide land use framework and intended to be considered for future updates. A development agreement option is also outlined for registered heritage properties. That's a tool to enable increased flexibility for the development of registered heritage properties, another way of incentivizing their protection and redevelopment. And a similar purpose, there's also incentive and bonus zoning provisions for heritage conservation on site. So again, an incentive to maintain heritage components under that program. And I'll talk a little bit more about bonus zoning in a couple of slides. And there's also heritage design requirements for heritage buildings and abutting properties. Another component from Package A is about housing, and of course housing is increasingly important these days with the growth that Halifax has experienced. And the Package A addresses the housing challenge by providing increased development opportunities, focus on areas served by transit. So just trying to increase the number of options and available development sites. There is requirements for a mix of unit types and high density development. So to make sure we have those mix of 2- and 3-bedroom units in bigger scale developments. There are allowances or provisions to allow for shared housing, so care facilities and group housing, work limits and home offices and secondary suites and backyard suites were already incorporated into Package B, so trying to accommodate a variety of different living arrangements. The bonus zoning tool that I mentioned is focused primarily on supporting affordable housing through money in lieu contributions, what the municipality is now working to redirect back to the nonprofit sector to support affordable housing developments, and also support for partnerships and other municipal initiatives to adjust the housing needs. So guiding policies to support working with the different levels of government. Economic development is, of course, an important plan, or really any plan. And the kind of key components of Package A that this group I think will be interested is first of all just the importance of regulatory certainty and a streamlined review process. Just to being clear about where development is directed, and the rules is an important component of a plan, and really supporting the kind of growth that I think we want to see in the regional center. With that, the plan provides for a wide range of both large and small scale development opportunities, support for commercial development districts. So this is a tool in the Halifax Charter where the municipality can phase in increases in tax assessment to reduce to mitigate impacts in a certain area. So there's policies to support for that tool. No, I would note that urban design and heritage protection supports tourism, and so as a way of keeping Halifax unique is and attracting visitors. There is policy support for the enclaves and innovation and incentives and partnerships. And also note, the overall the plan is looking to support livable communities, which is of course important to also attracting investment and talent to our region. Mobility is another key part of the plan. And this is, I think I mentioned about strategic growth, and that includes focusing growth near proposed high frequency, existing and proposed high frequency transit. So transit and growth very much coordinated together. Support for the traditional street grid and presentation connections. Reduce car parking requirements. So in some places, no parking requirements are very minimal. So really leaving it to the private sector, private market to decide on how much parking is needed for a development. Expanded accessibility provisions, and also the establishing a transportation reserve zone to preserve areas where the municipality intends to develop new or widened streets. I'll briefly mention environment, which generally builds on the direction from the regional plan, things like protection for wetlands and watercourses. There's support for district energy systems. Continuation of vertical coastal setbacks are established in the regional plan, and a little bit of an enhanced approach to have these coastal setbacks also apply to commercial and institutional uses, with flexibility, particularly for the downtown waterfront areas. Landscaping requirements, including rooftop landscaping. Barriers are trying to reduce barriers to rooftop solar by providing the height exemptions for those. So even if your building is already at the highest as tall as possible, you can still put solar panels on top, and also allowance provisions to allow for urban agriculture in all zones. So things like beekeeping and gardens. Package A also established a number of different implementation tools. So these are, the tools that really guide, whether or not a permit is issued and the different processes I need. I'll just touch on a couple of these without to try to avoid going too much into the weeds. One is the incentive and bonus zoning, because this is, building on the downtown Halifax plan. Package A really established a framework to apply it to all the regional center, primarily through a cash in lieu process where any developments over 2,000 square meters need to contribute either money in lieu or on-site bonus zoning requirements. And the bonus zoning is intended to mitigate the impacts of development on the surrounding community. So it's primarily focused on affordable housing, but can also be used for public art, heritage preservation, affordable cultural space, and also parks and open spaces. The other thing I'll quickly touch on is a relaxation on non-conforming uses and structure. When you go from any old plan to a new plan, there's going to be buildings and uses that don't necessarily fit the new zoning, and that's why there's some provisions to allow for these non-conforming uses to continue to exist and to expand, trying to reduce mitigate the impacts on those situations. Okay, so that's a brief overview of Package A. So what is proposed in Package B? What are the key updates? Generally, the approach through the Package B process is to respect the hard decisions and the debates that were made in the past. That council made some difficult decisions about where to allocate density and about building heights and the kind of key rules. And through Package B, we're looking to, refine the Package A, to approve Package A policies and regulations, partly because of the great feedback we received, but also the experience. It's been in place for 1.5 years now, so also municipal staff have some experience in administrating the plan, and we're proposing some updates based on those experiences. I think the most significant one is a further streamlining of the use of the site plan approval tool, which adds a number of months onto development processes for a number of projects through Package B. Package B is proposing to reserve that tool only for the exceptions instead of all tools. So very much could streamline the approval process for a number of projects. Proposing minor changes to built form and building design requirements. it's getting into the details of the controls on the building design. This is largely based on feedback and also the experiences. Generally these increase flexibilities for things like sloping sites and other items. There are a few additional package A zone lands, so a little bit more centers and a little bit more corridors based on further analysis. I will mention that Roby Street Transportation Reserve is applied to try to protect preserve land to be able to accommodate the proposed bus rapid transit route on the narrower portion of Roby Street. In response to council direction to look at the St. Patrick Alexander site, there is a new site-specific development agreement policy proposed to that site to further guide the development on the site, and also a number of implementation policy updates, primarily to clarify when rezoning proposals could be considered by council. Okay, thanks. That was a bit of a, so that kind of concludes a bit of an overview of the approved package A and some of the proposed updates to the package B process. I'm going to jump into now I guess the main part of the presentation, which are the new parts that are proposed through the package B process. All the other designations outside of those growth areas, which are newly being considered by council and the various review committees. So first of all, of course, an important part of any community is the parking community facilities. And so package B is proposing a designation to focus on these uses, but applied to parks and open spaces, schools and other community facilities in a kind of park-like setting or an open space setting. And overall, the intent is to protect and support a connected public park and open space network. The designation establishes two zones, a regional park zone, which is applied to the regional parks identified in the regional plan. So Point Pleasant Park would be a prime example. And otherwise, the PCF, a parking community facility zone, is applied to all other kind of public municipal parks and community facilities in that park-like setting. And I will note that there is some policy directions to prepare a regional center open space plan. The planning framework kind of establishes the rules and what are the zoning rules and setbacks for parks, but really how the municipality invests in programs of parks is more of a strategy. It's something that council decides through the budget process, and there's also sort of some policy directions to develop a strategy about the programming and investments in the park spaces in the regional center. The downtown designation is also, which is applied to downtown Dartmouth in package B, in package A, is applied to downtown Halifax through package B. And it's of course intended to support development in the core where the largest scale and the most intense uses are encouraged. So it's very much kind of the most flexible and largest scale policies and regulations. The downtown designation, as it's applied to downtown Halifax, pulls the existing downtown Halifax plan into the center plan framework by establishing a downtown Halifax zone and 8 special areas to fine tune the building controls or building design controls. I will note that the downtown plan will still live on for a little while longer for the Barrington Street and Old South Suburbs Heritage Conservation Districts. And this is because of the added complexities or added process that's needed to pull those areas into a different plan because the heritage conservation is under different legislations and different processes. So that work is starting to get underway to develop a downtown Halifax conservation district, which will tie all the conservation districts together, and they expect it to be completed in a year, I think a year to 2 years from now. So that intended to complete that pull the remaining areas into the plan at that time. Also, I'll highlight that that the detailed policies for the Cogswell area are to be incorporated following the completion of master infrastructure plan. So it's included in the plan, but the plan recognizes that once the subdivision happens and the roads are actually closed, you still need to provide some guidance to things like building heights and design and that's planned through a subsequent planning process focused on just that site. And I will also highlight there, in terms of changes, there's increased flexibility for waterfront special areas for waterfront special areas. That's the waterfront portion of the downtown Halifax area. The established residential designation is, I think, arguably the most significant part of Package B. It covers about a third of the regional center. So this is all the various low-rise neighborhoods in both Halifax and Dartmouth. The designation is intended to retain the scale of existing low-density neighborhoods while still providing opportunities for more housing options. So it's about maintaining what we have, but while still allowing for a modest increase in the number of different housing types and options. The designation permits secondary suites and backyard suites, so already region-wide amendments to allow this in the regional center, and Package B, of course, carries us forward, as well as continuing to allow for other types of housing, and related uses like shared housing, like the care facilities at a similar scale, home occupations and daycare uses, and more consistently across the regional center. There's also provisions to allow for local commercial and institutional uses to be considered by development agreement. So the development agreement tool does require public process and council decision in this proposed year, because it can also deal with hours of operation, which is often the focus of concern in a low density area, to kind of make sure if a convenience store is permitted, it's not permitted through all hours of the night. The designation establishes 4 zones. The established residential 1 or ER1 zone is the lowest density zone. It allows for 1 unit plus an accessory suite. The established residential 2 zone allows for 2 units, including semis or duplexes, plus accessory or backyard suites. The established residential 3 zones allows for all those plus 3 unit dwellings, and also for townhouses. And it's applied to more of the kind of transit corridors that happen to run through low density areas. And the last zone I mentioned is a newly proposed cluster housing zone, which is intended to accommodate both the existing mobile home parks and also kind of the clustering of individual low density homes on a single lot. So kind of that communal shared living arrangements where multiple low density homes might be accessed by a single shared driveway or pathway. So and applied in limited areas, but one that might be important to accommodate various kind of affordable housing initiatives. And recognizing that the different subdivisions were built at different times and have different character, the designation also establishes 5 different precincts and 10 special areas to fine-tune controls like lot coverage or front yard, the width of lots, so that kind of the built form character of a neighborhood can be maintained going forward. The institutional employment designation is an important one in the regional center. It's where we have many of our largest scale institutions, the Dalhousie Universities, the colleges, hospitals, departments of national events. It's applied to both those large scale institutional uses as well as smaller scale ones like places of worship and community centers. And it's intended to support the use and expansion of these institutions located in the regional center. And in short, we're glad we're here and we want them to stay and expand. The institutional employment designation establishes 5 different zones. So the institutional zone or INS zone is applied to those smaller scale institutional uses like libraries and community centers. There are 2 different university college zones. The UC1 or University College 1 is applied to more of the kind of open space or campus type setting, whereas the University College 2 zone has more of a downtown form, which is applied to more of the urban campuses like the Dalhousie University Carleton campus. We also have zones for the hospital zone and Department of National Defense, although acknowledge that the province and the federal governments don't typically get building permits or ask for municipal approvals for their projects. So the zones are fairly light on controls, recognizing that really it's about working more with those governments on shared interests versus prescribing kind of detailed controls that which won't necessarily be followed. There are provisions also for adaptive reuse of certain landmark buildings. So we have our heritage preservation is one thing, but the adaptive reuse enables some of those places of worship primarily that aren't necessarily registered heritage buildings to encourage them to be reused when maybe are no longer needed for their original use. The adaptive reuse enables them to be converted to a residential or a little bit of commercial use, provided the outside of the building envelope, the building is largely maintained as is, so a little bit increased flexibility. I also note that anticipate that Now, some of these institutional uses may need to expand or may want to redevelop into a different use, because they're no longer needed. That there is some allowances for the eventual expansion and reuse through a land use bylaw amendment process. So it could be considered through a rezoning process instead of going back and changing the policies in the plan. Industrial employment designation is also important to the regional center. Thinking about all the harbor-related industrial, especially along the waterfronts, and it's applied to all the existing and mixed industrial and commercial areas, and intended to support industrial development, limited commercial and harbor-related uses. So kind of protect these areas for industrial uses and the encroachment of residential uses, and that can negatively impact the viability of these areas. The designation establishes 3 different zones. It's the light industrial zone, which is applied to Woodside Industrial Park as a prime example. The harbor-rated industrial zone, places like the Halifax Shipyard. The commercial light industrial zone is more of a mixed commercial industrial zone, and it's applied to areas like Kemp Road and also portions of Windmill Road. I'll also highlight a mixed industrial and commercial special area. It's applied to the Sea Park Market and the Cove area at Dartmouth to promote a wide range of industrial and commercial uses in the same area. I'll note also there are policies to support a risk assessment related to Halifax Green Elevator, of requiring a development agreement for areas just adjacent to that, to ensure that the results of the study are considered. And also it's increased flexibility for research and development facility uses in the centers and downtown zones to provide increased opportunities for small scale manufacturing or kind of prototyping type facilities and labs to be allowed in kind of more of a commercial setting. And the last designation that I'll cover in package B is a water access designation, and it's applied to pre-Confederation water lots on the northwest arm of Lake Manook and Lake Micmac, and it's intended to protect a unique character and environment of water lots. And as viewers may or may not be aware, the pre-Confederation laws were created before Confederation, before Canada became a country. So there have some existing rights. And these can be approved if these can be infilled if the approval is provided by the federal government on the northwest arm or by the province on the lakes. And the municipality can't control whether or not land is infilled, but once it is infilled, we can control how the land is used afterwards. So the zoning applies to land after it's infilled. And so to discourage infilling and to prevent large-scale development on these infilled lands, we established a water access zone and 4 different special areas that fund being controlled, which generally limit the use of these infilled areas to parks and water access structures and boat clubs and so on. And I will note that this is not applied to the Halifax Harbor, where infilled areas will take on the zoning in the abutment areas, because we understand that infilling sometimes needs to happen for especially for industrial uses. Okay. I will, some of the items that were also considered through package B is we received a number of site-specific requests, quite a few requests. These were reviewed extensively by staff, and I will note that the last report on package B includes attachments that summarizes each request, how the proposed draft responds and the rationale for that. And looking at all these requests, some of the things we looked at were, opportunities to correct errors or inconsistencies, impacts and neighbors, reducing nonconformities, the local context, and alignment with other policies and council direction. So if there's interest in that, just kind of note that there is a lot of information on the centerplan.ca website if you want interested to see what various landowners are requesting and what the response was. Another item I'll highlight is challenges with the site plan approval transition. A previous draft of package B proposed that the site plan approval process, so applicants that had a site plan application in would be able to continue under the old plan, similar to what we can do with development agreements. What we learned recently through internal review process is that this is not actually supported by the AHM charter, because it is a as a right permitting process. And because we kind of learned understood this or learned this differences quite late in the process and need to work with existing developments to understand impacts. We're working with applicants right now to assess the impacts and also the options to facilitating a smooth transition between the existing package A and downtown plans and the proposed package B plans. And one of the last things I'll mention too is COVID-19 considerations. So we often get asked about the impact in the pandemic and the planning framework. The package A, if chamber members have been following, was of course approved before we even we're used to the terms like social distancing and lockdowns. And package B is of course being developed right in the middle of the pandemic. So it is something that myself and the team have been putting quite a bit of thought into, and it kind of outline some of the following approaches and also observations from the existing plan. So first, I'll note is that I think the importance of complete communities that the pandemic is showing. So this, if earlier in our presentation, I explained that complete community is one of the core concepts of the central plan. And I think the pandemic is showing how important that is, how important it is to have access to open spaces and shops and services close to where you live, as being important to resiliency of different communities. It's also, I think, highlighting the importance of flexible land use controls. And I mentioned in the urban design slide that generally the approach is to control the shape of buildings and being more flexible about how the land is used, how the buildings are used inside. And so for a place like downtown Halifax, where we're not sure about the future of office developments in the medium to long term, that flexible approach enables kind of office buildings to be converted to residential and vice versa, depending on market needs. And not to say there's not other costs involved, but from a zoning framework or policy framework, it's allowed and aren't kind of process or regulatory barriers to that. We also put some work into looking at pedestrian-oriented commercial streets. So these are streets where commercial uses aren't just allowed, but actually required on the ground floor. And we are proposing some adjustments to allow for office uses outside of the downtown designation. So the thinking is the office uses can also be quite engaging or animating, and that some more options might be needed in some of the Main Street areas like Quinning Pool and Goddington Street. However, kind of with downtown being such an office area, that where it wasn't appropriate for downtown areas, at least not in the short term. I'll also highlight the streamlined development review process. So I mentioned we're proposing to further streamline the site plan approval process, to limit it to more the exceptions, and this could also shave off a number of months in the process and help bring projects to construction phase sooner, a little bit faster. And also in recognizing that the private development are also experience some of the same challenges we have with our planning process, there's also the package B proposes to increase the transition timeframes for existing development agreement applications, so to allow for an additional 12 months to complete those processes under the previous plans. Okay, and just to explain our process, I think in my introduction I explained that we're just going through the committee review process now. So this group, you're seeing some of the similar information that the various council committees are considering now and making recommendations. We have been through a number of committees in June and July, including the community councils, community planning economic development standing committee and design review committee, community design advisory committee and heritage advisory committee. Although recommendations in the various committees are being collected, will come together for discussion at regional council or committee as a whole, where we expect regional council to kind of give the final direction on which recommendations to change the plan with and which to not. And at this point, we're tentatively targeting a public hearing for late September of 2021 for the overall project, of course, contingent on things like the pandemic and council decisions. And I think I'll end by my presentation by kind of switching gears a little bit to look ahead past package B. So it's been a long journey to get to I guess towards the end of the second phase of the central plan. But there's always more planning work to do, and so I want to just highlight some things that the chamber members of the Chamber of Commerce might be interested in knowing about or are going to be coming in the years ahead. First, I think I mentioned in an earlier slide that there is a work for developing a one downtown Halifax Heritage Conservation District, which ties the existing heritage conservations together, and also also applies to the historic properties area. There are a number of proposed heritage conservation districts proposed to various parts of the regional center, where more detailed planning work and heritage design work is needed. And so that work plan is starting with the downtown Halifax, but it's intended to tackle those in the coming years. And I also mentioned the public engagements for the Cogswell land, so that you can expect to happen immediately after Package B is approved. And looking further ahead too is to go back to the secondary plan and bylaw simplification program. After the regional center is updated, the focus of this comprehensive planning work switches gears to the other parts of the regional center, other parts of the municipality, with the focus on suburban areas to consolidate, update the plans for the suburban areas, which also experience a lot of growth. So areas like Bedford and Eastern Passage and Spryville, etc. Okay, well, with that, I very much thank the Chamber for inviting me to present, and appreciate everyone taking the time to listen. I hopefully provided a good overview of the central plan package B and what's in it, and what are the key items that are key policies and regulations that are proposed that are so important, I guess, to guiding the long-term growth of the regional center. And with that, I think we have lots of time for questions, and I'm going to pass it back to Kent to moderate from here, and myself and Kasia will be pleased to do our best to answer the good questions I'm sure that are sure are coming. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass it back to Kent.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ben. Really appreciate that information. And there's a lot there. I'm sure it's pretty hard to condense that down into some slides after all the work that's been done on the center plan over the years. So let's start out with a question from one of the attendees, from Tanya, directed at Ben. Ben, with housing, is it intended that there will be a mix of housing options available in a community, i.e. affordable rentals, subsidized condos, single family homes, for example?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I think it's a good opportunity, I guess, to explain maybe the limitations of municipal planning versus what maybe some of the tools that the province can do. So when we talk about providing housing options, we're talking about the form, or I guess the unit type. So we're talking about, of course, there's a need for multi-units, but there's also a need for ground entries, be able to walk out your door and get right outside. So everything from secondary suites and single unit dwellings to townhomes, kind of smaller scale apartment buildings, and then of course larger scale projects. So when I talk about housing options, we're talking about accommodating a range of living arrangements that suit different people's needs. When it comes to things like controlling for subsidized housing or different kind of rent levels, that's getting I guess challenging for a municipality, because we can't regulate tenancy, and we can't regulate I think we learned through our bonus zoning work that we also have challenges with monitoring affordable housing development. So that's why the approach to the municipality is, on one hand, make sure the zoning rules reduce barriers and provide opportunities, but then have this bonus zoning program where the money in lieu collected for that is redirected through municipal programs to support primarily the nonprofit housing sector. And that's being looked at, working in partnership with the province. And there's other affordable housing initiatives we can do to support groups. So that's one of the biggest ones. So hopefully that answers that question.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. And just staying on that, something popped into my head, and some work that we've been doing, and then I'll get back to some questions that are online here. When you talk about affordable housing and say, for example, the bonus zoning for developers, has the city ever looked at inclusionary zoning which is a bit more directive so that the developers can't sort of opt out of affordable housing by paying, what's the right terminology? By funding the bonus zoning, where that money can be used in various ways, versus inclusionary zoning, where they're forced to build affordable housing units in their developments.
Yes, thanks, Kent, for that follow-up question. And I hope it doesn't become a theme, but also point to the Halifax Charter and a bit of a limitations there. So absolutely, inclusionary zoning is an interesting tool. It's one that's used in different provinces. It's not one that's available in Nova Scotia. So under provincial legislations, we can't use that tool. I will note that municipal council or regional council has asked the province for that tool in years past, and I think we are hopeful that the province might be open to that. I think there was a recent report by the Affordable Housing Working Group, I might be getting the name wrong, that also recommended that. So we'd be excited to try to figure out how to use that tool. As you suggest, it has its benefits, but it's not one that's available. So the one that we have to use is the bonus zoning.
Gotcha. Okay, no, that's fair, and I understand there's a lot of fine lines to walk between provincial and municipal authorities on a lot of this stuff. So I'm not trying to put you on the spot, and I know some
Yeah, that's okay.
Go that way, but so here's a couple of questions coming in from people that are watching today. What other departments other than planning are in contact or use the center plan? Is it a widely read document throughout the municipal government, and what might be missed if it is not?
Thanks for the question. Good insights, I guess, into how big a municipality is and how many different things we do other than planning. But the short answer is that yes, it's used by pretty much all departments. And so when we develop the plan, I will acknowledge that it's myself and my team that are largely doing the legwork, but the work that the other departments go in, we work very closely with Parks and Recreation, transportation, all the different transportation professionals, the staff that administer the plan. The land use was one thing, but it has to be coordinated with all the different municipal operations and also strategic investments. So to be clear, it's not just a planning department document. The planning department is the lead and of course administers it. It's coordinated with the work of an overall municipality, and it's especially around the kind of operational and programming side. I think I mentioned the open space plan would be an example of that. The zoning can establish rules for parks, but really the part that people are interested is how is the municipality going to invest and program our park spaces.
Yeah, fair enough. You mentioned, Ben, September 2021 is sort of the next big public hearing phase of the package B and then the center plan. And then you mentioned also that after that would come sort of the Cogswell development. And then after that would come sort of the more rural areas for looking at redesigning their planning. I don't want to put you on the spot again, but what kind of timing are you guys thinking of for really having the full center plan finalized and complete? And I know it's a bit of a living document. And then sort of when does that then project out into Sheet Harbor, for example, into the more rural areas of planning development?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'll be, if you don't mind, I'll be a little bit vague about timing, but I will note that kind of the next steps, the items I had on the next steps would be happening concurrently. So it's not as though it's like one and then the next and then the other. Different teams would be taking that work on. But having said that, the Downtown Halifax Heritage Conservation District and the Cogswell, the more detailed policy for the Cogswell area, those are, I think the Downtown Halifax Conservation District, that work is already underway and expected to be completed within the next year or two. And the Cogswell planning policies, we're anticipating starting that right after package B and trying to get that done within about a year of that. And at the same time, once package B is done, the department will be turning our attention to the next phase of bylaw simplification. So concurrent with those other smaller projects in the regional center, we'll be turning our attention primarily to the suburban area. So urban service, water and sewer service parts of the municipality aren't in the regional center. And I guess after that would be the rural areas.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Another question from an attendee. In terms of, in terms of complete communities, will this be extended outside of the center plan given the larger number of people living outside the center plan geography? Yeah,
thanks for your question. Actually, reminds me of a question that councillor in a suburban district was asking too about the center plan is all great, but what does this all mean for suburban areas? Without jumping too far ahead into the suburban planning work that's still to come, I think it's fair to say that a lot of the kind of concepts and tools that were developed in the central plan are very much applicable to suburban areas as well. So while the specifics might be different, the idea, the importance of complete communities that was the focus of the question, absolutely, I think is also just as relevant in the rural and suburban areas as it is in the center. There might be some fine tuning of that, based on maybe not just within walking distance. It might be a little bit more of a short drive, or especially when you get into rural context. But that concept is valid, of course, not just for the regional center, but for all the municipality.
Yeah, sort of a guidebook for broadening the plan as you go. Yeah, it gives you a roadmap to draw from. That makes sense. Another quick question, and maybe this one will be a quick one. What percentage of those in HRM live inside or outside the designation of the center plan?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I don't think I have the exact numbers off my top of my head, but it's about 25% of HRM's population lives in the regional center. So that's I do my math. It's a little more than 100,000. Geez, I don't have the number off the top of my head, so I shouldn't say it because I'll say the wrong number. But it's about a quarter of overall municipality's population. So a significant portion, and that doesn't count that counts living. Not when you start counting the number of workers in the regional center during the daytime, the number of people actually in the regional center is quite high when you think about all the pre-pandemic phase, all the workers in the office towers and businesses in the regional center as well.
Great, thanks, Ben. And I'm gonna give you a throwaway as a last question before we have to wrap up. What are you most excited about for the future of the center plan, and maybe for the city as it relates to the center plan?
Let's see. I think it's I think the exciting part, I think, about the center plan and some of the core. At its core, I think the center plan is really about filling in or the evolution of the core of the municipality. The road layout, the park, the overall structure of the center is there. But what we're really talking about is looking ahead to the next 10, 20, 30 years to have those types of communities, those resilient communities that we already like now and they want to see more of. So I think the exciting part of the center plan is how it can support the evolution of these complete communities, support the existing ones, but also have areas like Wise Road and other areas that have so much development potential to support the evolution of those areas in the decades ahead to become kind of more of those complete walkable communities that we already have in the regional center. So kind of more of what we have in more places. And so I think that's the exciting part. I think we're already starting to see a lot of that happening now. Yeah,
it's interesting to hear it it's been so great to hear it live when you think about placemaking and participatory cities and how that integrates into urban planning and certainly the center plan. So rather than always hearing about a document, it's been great to hear it live from you. So and to put that perspective, that real thinking perspective of what's gone into it, put a face to that. So really appreciate that. So unfortunately, we're out of time. I'm going to wrap it up here. So thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, and thank you Ben and Cassia for joining us and sharing the center plan work. It's really an exciting project for Halifax and for the development of the future of the city and the region for that matter. And we look forward to seeing it completed, even though I truly believe it is a living document and will evolve, and people are using it now. So for those attending, join us on Thursday. We've got another exciting webinar on effective marketing strategies for service businesses. We're actually hosting an in-person event on July 9th. We'll be having wine and cheese on a boat. So please register at halifaxchambers.com/events if you're interested in getting out and enjoying the waves and a bit of wine. This webinar was recorded and will be available to all attendees shortly on our YouTube channel. So on that note, again, I want to thank Ben and Cassia for joining us. Thank you all for attending, and I hope you all have a great day. Take care.